verse 24. And here's the one where I'm speaking to what Deborah brought up yesterday, or on Sabbath, not yesterday. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and the spoil and the riches. Yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. This is that 360-year time period. And I don't know if you've caught it, but we've identified the end of the 360-year time period as the time of the end, and also the beginning. Okay, because when at the Battle of Actium, pagan Rome has just conquered its third obstacle, so the beginning would be the 360-year, or the time of the end. But also the 360 parallels the 1260, and at the end of the 1260, you've got a time of the end. So you've got a time of the end on both the beginning and the end of the 360, and this is the 360. And as we go down through these verses, you're going to see two more verses where it talks about the time appointed being the time of the end, and it's the same 360-year period. That's why I'm saying it may not be 22, it may be whatever that would be, 20 or 19, where this same time of the end is being marked. So verse 24, the 360 years is the time of the end, and that 360 years is referred to in verse 27. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. And Uriah Smith will tell you this end is the year 330, when the kingdom is divided to east and west by Constantine. And in verse 29, it's going to do the same thing. And at the time appointed, he shall return. Okay, that time appointed also the end of the 360. So verse 27 and 29 are times of the ends. But there's something that I'll run by you now. So we run this by us a couple times. It's a passage that's difficult for me to get in my head, so I assume it might be for others. In verse 27, when it says, "And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table." Who are the two that are speaking lies at one table to each other that are going to do mischief?
Antony and Octavius.
Yeah, Antony and Octavius, who also is Augustus. Okay, so it's these two Roman guys, and in this verse it's talking about the end being at the time appointed, which would be the year 330. But they would have had to spoke lies at one table before the 360-year period began. Why? This is the part you really need to settle into. See, it's verse 24 introduces the 360-year period, and verse 27 and verse 29 is talking about the end of the 360-year period. So from verse 24 to verse 29, it's about these 360 years. And in verse 27, it's talking about Antony of Antony and Cleopatra fame, sitting at a table with Augustus Caesar, who at that time is called Octavius Caesar, and lying to each other. But where does Antony die?
Where does Antony die?
Yeah.
In the Battle of Actium.
Yeah, he dies at the beginning of the 360 years. Right? So when did they sit and tell lies to each other? Had to be before. Has to be before. So what do you see? There's some kind of treaty right here. This is another line. They're sitting at a table before the 360. Remember, this 360 is repeated twice. Before Antony dies, he's got to sit down at a table with Augustus and make some kind of agreement that he's lying about and that Augustus is lying about. And I'm saying that this 360 is repeated over here with 362. So whatever this treaty is, it's probably May 14th, right? probably May 14th, but it keeps coming up in this history. It has to happen before the time of the end that begins the period when the papacy rules supremely. Papacy rules supremely from the Sunday law in the United States until Michael stands up. But the papacy rules supremely in the United States from the midnight cry to the Sunday law, because those are parallel histories. So before you get to the midnight cry, Anthony and Octavius got to sit down at some table and strike some kind of agreement. And Anthony is representing at that point Egypt, and Octavius Rome. And I would think Egypt.
Would July 18th be the time of the end?
Would July 18th be the time of the end? Perhaps, but I said May 14th.
I don't understand why.
Because on May 14th, you got the leaders of the world coming together with the Pope of Rome to push his agenda on global warming and introduce a god that his fathers never knew before, the goddess Pachamama. And he's going to conquer them with a small people. We've read that already. Verse 23. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. Now I know what that means about the Jews helping the Romans in that history. But the Pope of Rome isn't going to use the Jews. What small people, and you and I already talked, so you can't say. In Africa, Odilio put a 5-second rule on me. He would ask a question and I'd automatically answer it. So he put a 5-second rule on me. He'd ask his question. He says 5-second rule, where I couldn't say anything for 5 seconds to get everyone else opportunity to speak. What's the small people? 5-second rule on you. No. In the Bible there are small and great, rich and poor, free and bond. Who's the small people? It's the minorities. It's the homosexuals. It's the minority cultures in any. It's the same agenda as global warming. And he's going to use that liberal program to capture the world. And as he does so, he's typifying the Catholic attack on this movement.
And really, what you're saying, that reflects, every now and then when I look at the news, that's what he continually, not continually, but almost continually hammers at about the minorities.
Yes.
Yes. And so do P&T.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Fits.
Yeah, they're Jesuit plants. They're echoing his agenda in this time period. Okay. So verse 30.